Good morning and welcome to the 17th episode of Ahargana. I am standing in front of Malaya Madeshwara Hills. This is south of Bangalore city. It's about 7:30 in the morning. The hills form my backdrop. In fact, the one right in the center, which you cannot see completely and clearly because there is a slight mist, that is Hills. The one on the other side is Nagabetta and the one on this side is Navilubetta. That is the snake and the peacock. This is south of Bangalore city, but this is part of the Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary and the Hills Wildlife Sanctuary, Malaya Madeshwara Wildlife Sanctuary. And I am right now not in the middle of the sanctuary, I am standing at the edge of the sanctuary, so there is no wildlife here. I can hear the cocks crowing and the dogs barking here, and there is a field behind me which is irrigated by the water from this tank. This tank collects all the water coming down from those hills, and they built a tank bund. I am standing on top of that, which holds the water as a small reservoir, and that is used for irrigation purposes. This is part of the Kaveri river basin. The Kaveri in fact runs to the north of Hills. It runs in a west to east direction, and then it takes a deep southward turn and crosses over into Tamil Nadu. In fact, to reach this point, either I have to drive over Hills and come here, or what I did was drive in the plains, cross over into Tamil Nadu, drive along the Kaveri, go up to the Mettur dam on the Kaveri and the Stanley reservoir, loop back and come upstream, and that is what I did. So it takes quite some effort to reach this place, though it is only 200 kilometers from Bangalore city. And Hills is a sacred hill in the sense that there is a temple to Malaya Madeshwara on top of the hills, and people walk from Bangalore to Hills to be there for Shivratri festival, which is a grand festival. It is about 200 kilometers from Bangalore. It is beautiful to be here, so close to Bangalore, but completely out of the hustle and bustle. I can hear the birds chirping, a gentle breeze is blowing, but it is beginning to die out. The sun is coming up, shining straight in my face. Very nice spot to be in. But we all know that we are not here to discuss nature or Hills. We are here to discuss nature, at least not on this scale, but on a much grander scale, on the scale of the moon and the sun. So we have made significant progress on discussing Sauramana, and the next topic that we have in front of us is the ritu, the seasons. But before I get into the seasons, I am going to take a small digression in this episode. So when I spoke about uttarayana, I mentioned that Makara sankranti is no longer the beginning of uttarayana today, but it was the beginning of uttarayana a long time back, in 285 AD actually. What does that mean? So if you look at Sauramana, which we have discussed, first I spoke about rashi and nakshatra, which are based on Meshadhi, that is the starting point of rashi and nakshatra. Then I spoke about uttarayana, dakshinayana, devayana, pitryana, for which I introduced 4 additional points, the 2 ayanas and the 2 vishuvaths. So uttarayana, dakshinayana, devayana, pitryana did not care about Meshadhi. So these are 2 different systems within Sauramana which are coexisting, correct. So when we have multiple systems like this, is there a need to synchronize them? No, we took a lot of effort to synchronize Sauravarsha and Chandravarsha, and we introduced an entire Chandramasa called Adhikamasa. So do we have to do something here to synchronize these 2? The answer is no, we do not have to do anything to synchronize. In fact, we can't do anything to synchronize these, but these 2 were naturally synchronized a long time back. in 285 AD. What does that mean? That means that you have Meshadhi and vasanta vishuvath, one of these 4 points. These 2 points were one and the same in 285 AD. Subsequently, they started drifting apart. So, what started drifting? Did both of them move or did one of them start moving? The answer is Meshadhi is rock solid. Meshadhi does not move, it is fixed, and it is the beginning of, there is an asterism called Mesha, and with respect to the asterism, Meshadhi is sitting there fixed. It is a point on the ecliptic fixed. It is the vasanta vishuvath that moves. And vasanta vishuvath is the point where the equator and the ecliptic intersect. That means the sun crosses the equator and comes north of the celestial equator at vasanta vishuvath. That point is moving, and that movement in English is known as precession of the equinox, because vasanta vishuvath is March equinox or vernal equinox. And when vasanta vishuvath moves, the other 3 points also move, because they are all tied to each other, they are all 90 degrees apart. So, it is this precession of the equinox that I want to illustrate to you in this episode. And in 285 AD they were both together, but today they have drifted apart. Vasanta vishuvath has moved apart, and the gap between Meshadhi and vasanta vishuvath is 24 degrees, 24.15 degrees. And that gap is a familiar term, you might have heard of this term. That gap is called Ayanamsha, and it is ever widening, it is increasing from 285 AD to today, and in future it will continue to increase. So, this movement of the vasanta vishuvath away from Meshadhi, which is called precession of the equinox, is what I am going to illustrate in today's episode. I will visually show it to you so you can see the movement happening, but it is a very slow movement, in the sense that it moves 1 degree in 72 years. That's low it is. So, if you know somebody who is 72 years old, during their lifetime vasanta vishuvath moved 1 degree, that is all. 1 degree, if you try to observe visually, is very difficult to judge a 1 degree movement of a celestial body. And this is not even a celestial body, this is a point in space, and Meshadhi is also a point in space. But it is because of this that Makara Sankranti is no longer the beginning of uttarayana. And a similar situation arises in ritu also, which I will go to next, because the definition of ritus in Surya Siddhanta also starts with Makara Sankranti. So, once I cover this, once I show you the precession of the equinox in this episode, when I go to ritu, you will completely understand why the Surya Siddhanta definition and my definition would be different. So, I am going to visually show to you the precession of the equinox. The Sanskrit term for this is also ayana, because this is also a movement, but this is not the movement of the sun to the north and south, this is the movement of the vasanta vishuvath, very slow movement. So, I am going to visually show you the precession of the equinox. I will roll the animation now, take a look. Okay, let's get started. In this episode, we will take a close look at the intriguing concept of Ayanamsha. Before we can understand Ayanamsha, we have to quickly recap what we have seen so far in Sauramana. So, you know that there is Meshadhi, this is the starting point of the Hindu zodiac, that is the 0 degree point. And in the last few episodes, we have seen these 4 points, a set of 4 points, the 2 vishuvaths and the 2 ayanas. And we defined uttarayana, dakshinayana, devayana and pitryana with respect to these 4 points. Now, Meshadhi in turn, we defined earlier as the starting point of both the nakshatra mandala as well as the rashi mandala. So let me bring the Rashi Mandala into this picture. So now it suddenly became very cluttered. But you have seen all of this in isolation. So there are these 4 points, the 2 vishuvaths and the 2 ayanas. And there is Meshadhi. And starting from Meshadhi, here is Mesha Rashi, Vrishava Rashi, Mithuna Rashi, Karkata Rashi, etc., etc. Now the Rashis are starting with the Meshadhi, whereas Uttarayana is starting with this point, Dakshinayana point. Devayana is starting with this point, vasanta vishuvath. All this you have seen in the previous episode. So it's kind of like we have 2 different starting points in Sauramana itself. One is Meshadhi, which is the starting point for the Rashi Mandala. The other is vasanta vishuvath, which is the starting point for Devayana, where the sun goes north of the equator, celestial equator. And if you have 2 starting points, and I brought them together on this picture, the question arises, is there an option or a possibility or a need to synchronize these? Now, we have seen a lot of synchronization. We have seen in the past in Chandramana itself, there is Amanta and Purnimanta traditions, which had different starting points. They were not synchronized, but they had different starting points, 180 degrees apart. We have synchronized Chandramana and Sauramana by introducing Adhikamasa. Now within Sauramana itself, is there a need to synchronize vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi? Because they are so far away. Can we somehow bring them together, or is there anything to do with respect to this gap between vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi? That is the essence of this episode. So I'm going to move one step forward in the animation. I will now zoom in on this segment of the ecliptic. So here is Meshadhi. This is the starting point of Mesha, and the Mesha asterism is here. Here is vasanta vishuvath at the 0 degree point of the western ecliptic. And I suddenly introduced this term called Ayanamsha. And I'm saying it's 24.15 degrees. If you look closely, you may already understand what this stands for. This is nothing but the gap between vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi. As simple as that. This gap is known as Ayanamsha or Ayanamsha. And you can literally read it off the Stellarium screen, because this is 0 degrees. And here is Meshadhi, it's less than 30 degrees, so it's somewhere around, this line is probably 25 degrees, so this is 24.15 degrees. Straightforward definition. And what does the word Ayanamsha stand for? What is this Ayana and Amsha? I will come to it in a moment. So the gap between vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi is Ayanamsha, and it's 24.15 degrees. So what? Should we worry about this? Should we synchronize this? Should we do something about this? This is where it becomes intriguing. So let me correct my statement a little bit. The gap between vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi as of 2022 April 14th, that is the date on the top left hand side of the screen, was 24 degrees 15 minutes. So why am I bringing the date into this picture? Because this value of Ayanamsha is not fixed. It changes with time. And that is the intriguing part, and that in fact is an extremely mind-bending part of the entire Hindu calendar. So what do I mean by saying this gap changes with time? I will show it to you visually. I am now going to use Stellarium as a time machine, and I'm going to take you backwards in time. So because this is software, I can do all kinds of magic. In the real world, in reality, you can only go forward in time. You can never go back. But with Stellarium, I can go backwards in time. I'm going to start running these years backwards. And I don't want to run them backwards for a few days or a few months or a few years. I want to run them backwards for a few centuries, even beyond a millennia. So I'm going to roll the animation and see what happens. You see two things. First, you see this 0 degree point is moving towards Meshadhi. The gap is reducing. And up here you see the time is changing. We have come to 1600, 1500, 1400, 1300, all AD. 1200 AD, and as time goes backwards and backwards, you are seeing this gap is reducing and reducing. And you see this point, the 0 degree point, is approaching Meshadhi. And this is the precession of the equinox, because this 0 degree point is vasanta vishuvath, it is the March equinox, and it is moving. Instead of saying moving, we say precession. And now it's come very close to Meshadhi. I'm fine tuning the years a little bit to bring it exactly onto Meshadhi, and I stop the animation. So now the Ayanamsha has become 0 degrees. Vasanta vishuvath is coinciding with Meshadhi. In a way, it's now synchronized, but it is synchronized because I went back in time to 285 AD. So if you check up history, you will find 285 AD is the beginning of the Gupta Empire. So this was a couple of decades before Chandragupta the first became the emperor. So this was probably in the time of Ghatotkacha, who was the father of Chandragupta the first. And at that time, Vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi were one and the same point, and Ayanamsha was 0. And you saw clearly what moved. Meshadhi did not budge. Meshadhi was always here, and with respect to Meshadhi, here is the asterism. That did not change. But you remember Vasanta vishuvath was somewhere here when we started this animation. That moved and that came here. So the March equinox changed its position through the years when I ran the animation backwards, and it came here. And that movement of the equinox is called precession of the equinox. And why does that happen? I will not go into the details now, but the Earth's axis is tilted and the Earth is spinning like a top. But when the Earth is spinning, the axis is not pointing in the same direction. It gradually drifts. It drifts about 1 degree every 72 years. Very, very, very slow. When I said gradually, that's what I meant. Very slowly, the axis. So the direction the axis of the Earth is pointing keeps changing slowly. And that causes this precession of the equinox. So the net result is there was a time long, long ago in 285 AD when the Vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi were one and the same. Apart from the fact that this is all very intriguing and mind-boggling, is there any other reason why I specifically came to this topic at this point in time? The answer is yes. Remember, when I talked about Uttarayana, I pointed out that we have a tradition that Uttarayana begins with Makara sankranti, but that is no longer true today. That tradition was true a long time back. Now you will begin to understand why I said that. Because as you can see, a long time back in 285 AD, Vasanta vishuvath and Meshadhi were one and the same. They were at the same point in space. Vasanta vishuvath moved from here to here. Now if Vasanta vishuvath moved, then it also implies that the other 3 points also moved. The Sharad vishuvath as well as the 2 Ayana points, all of them have moved by the same amount. Because these 4 points are a set of points which are tied together. They are 90 degrees apart. Each from one to the other is 90, 90, 90, 90 degrees. Now, what does that imply? So, I'm going to quickly change the view. So, now you see the entire celestial sphere, except now Meshadhi and Vasanta Vishuvath are one and the same. Let me bring back the three lines, the Tropic of Cancer, Capricorn, as well as the celestial equator. Now I'm going to spin the celestial sphere by 90 degrees, and here is dakshinayana. So where is Makara sankranti? So you know these plus symbols are the sankranti points. These plus symbols. So here is Makara rashi, it is ending here, and then Kumbha rashi begins, Kumbha rashi ends here, Meena rashi begins. So Makara rashi is beginning here. This is Makara rashi. So Makara sankranti and dakshinayana are one and the same point in 285 AD, 1800 years back. So now if I move the sun to Makara sankranti of 285 AD, it was not January 14th. It was December 21st was Makara sankranti in those days, if you had used the Christian calendar at that time. And at that time, the sun was at dakshinayana point and Makara sankranti point. So indeed, at that time, dakshinayana ended here on Makara sankranti and uttarayana began with Makara sankranti. And this is what is defined in Surya Siddhanta. And this was true in 285 AD. So I can hazard a guess that probably Surya Siddhanta was written around 285 AD or somewhere thereabouts. May not be exactly that year, because the movement of these equinoxes is so small. In one lifetime, it moves just by 1 degree, 72 years. And we don't know what the lifespan was in those days. So it would take multiple astronomers over many generations working together, passing on data to understand that the equinoxes are moving. So somewhere around that period of 285, 380, somewhere in that period, it was observed that Makara sankranti and dakshinayana are coinciding, and the definition was made. But we are holding on to that definition even today. That is the power of tradition. Though today we know about precession of the equinox and that it is moved, since 285 AD to today, it is the equinoxes have moved 24 degrees. We know that, but still we say uttarayana begins with Makara sankranti. And we just keep that up as a tradition, whereas it's contradictory with reality. We are holding on to an ancient tradition. Now, there are a few more observations I would like to make at this point. One is that why is this word Ayanamsha, where did it come from? It is actually Ayanamsha. And in this context, Ayana always means movement. And in this context, it's a movement of equinox, the precession of the equinox, not just the movement of the sun. It's a context-sensitive word here. And Amsha is nothing but the number of degrees by which it has moved. So today, Ayanamsha is 24 degrees. That means it has moved by 24 degrees since the last time it was coinciding with Meshadhi. So Ayanamsha is 24 degrees today. Another two terms which it is possible to explain now is, so if you look at rashis, they are dependent on Meshadhi. So are the nakshatras. They are not affected by Ayanamsha at all. Rashi is rock solid. You saw that it didn't budge. Neither the Meshadhi point nor the Mesha Rashi asterism, none of them budged. Meena Rashi asterism, nothing changed. So they are not affected by Ayanamsha. So Rashi and nakshatras are Nirayana calendric elements. Nirayana, they are not bothered by Ayana. Whereas uttarayana, dakshinayana, devayana, pitryana, and ritu, which I will go to next in the later episode, are all affected by the precession of the equinox. They are affected by this ayana, and hence they are called sayana calendric elements. That's the difference between Nirayana and sayana calendric elements. I had used this term Nirayana when I defined nakshatras and rashis. I mentioned that all those angles are Nirayana angles. That means those angles continue to remain good. They are never changed by the precession of the equinox. It was good 1000 years back, 2000 years back. It is good today also. Whereas uttarayana, dakshinayana definitions change because they are affected rather by the precession of the equinox. So they are sayana elements. Now, I will make one final observation before I close this episode, and this has to do with the Ayanamsha value. So let me take you back, kind of rewind this animation. So I brought you back to 2022 and April 14th, and you can see that the Ayanamsha value is 24.15 degrees. And vasanta vishuvath is here, Meshadhi is here. This gap is 24.15 degrees. Now I calculated this Ayanamsha using Stellarium because Meshadhi is 180 degrees opposite Chitra nakshatra. So from Stellarium I obtained the ecliptic longitude of Chitra nakshatra and subtracted 180. And that gave me 24.15 degrees. But you might have heard of many different Ayanamsha values. For example, Lahiri Ayanamsha, Raman Ayanamsha, KP Ayanamsha, etc. Now, my way of doing this is going to be closest to Lahiri Ayanamsha because it is N.C. Lahiri who defined position of Meshadhi like this, that it is 180 degrees opposite of Chitra nakshatra, and if you take this, it tallies with many of our ancient astronomical works. The others slightly disagree. They place Meshadhi a little bit this side, a little bit that side. In fact, some people say that Meshadhi should actually be coinciding with Revati. While somebody else objects, Revati is a very faint star, it's hardly visible. So why would our ancestors have chosen Revati as Meshadhi? Whereas Chitra is a very bright star, and that's why Meshadhi was chosen 180 degrees opposite of Chitra. So because of these variations, there are different values for Ayanamsha. So Lahiri Ayanamsha is closest to the one. In fact, Lahiri's calculations are likely to be much more accurate because he is an astronomer. He was an astronomer, but I am not. And Raman Ayanamsha and KP Ayanamsha could be different by 1 or 2 or 3 degrees even. But this is the reason for it, that none of them use Stellarium. I am the only guy using Stellarium here. The others all use proper astronomical calculations to determine how far away Meshadhi is from vasanta vishuvath. Or the other way, vasanta vishuvath is from Meshadhi. So with that observation, let me close this episode. I know this has been a rather long episode, but this is also a fairly complicated and mind-boggling topic. Though the animation is fairly simple because hardly much happened during the animation. Vasanta Vishuvath moved very, very slowly until it came and became one with Meshadhi. That's all that happened. But it took close to 1800 years to complete that movement and come and align with Meshadhi. And that is where the complexity comes. And the fact that Vasanta Vishuvath is even today considered as the 0-degree point of the ecliptic coordinate system of the Western astronomers. So all these introduce a lot of complexities. I will not go into them right now. We have had enough complexities for one episode. So let me close this episode here. I thank you very much for your patience and thank you very much for watching.
So now you know all about Ayanamsha and about sayana and Nirayana, calendric elements. Now it makes it all the more easier for me to proceed into ritus in the next episode, because otherwise I have to once again repeat in the ritus that the definition given in Surya Siddhanta is no longer valid today. And I have to give a different definition using the vishuvaths and the ayanas. But now you know why it is no longer valid today, because Surya Siddhanta was probably written around 300 AD, and that time it was valid, those definitions were valid, and due to the precession of the equinox, the definition is no longer valid. So, in the next episode I will give you the details of the definition of the ritu, but in short it is a 6-part division of the ecliptic and the Sauravarsha. Rashi is a 12-part division, nakshatra is a 27-part division of the ecliptic, not the Sauravarsha. Uttarayana, dakshinayana, 2 parts of the ecliptic and the Sauravarsha, devayana, pitryana also 2 parts, ritu is 6-part definition. But apart from precession of the equinoxes, there is another serious problem with ritus. That is, I have a serious problem with the way ritus have been defined in our Panchanga. So, I will tell you why. Because I grew up in a place called Tirunelveli, which is about 8.5 degrees north of the equator. And there were only 3 seasons there, hot, hotter and hottest. I have repeated this multiple times in this series. And I honestly mean it is hot, hotter, hottest. Same if you are living in Chennai, and probably it is the same if you live in Andhra Pradesh or Kerala for that matter. But our Hindu Panchanga tells us that there are 6 seasons, which is not a problem, but 2 of those 6 seasons, 1/3 of the Sauravarsha is winter. Now that is problematic to me, because I never saw winter in Tirunelveli. It never got cold, absolutely never. Many parts of Andhra Pradesh the same thing, and you tell me that 1/3 of the year is winter. How can I accept it? It is problematic. But this is a problem not of astronomy, but of geography, the geography of India. And I have shown you the geography of India also in an earlier tutorial. As the sun started moving, as the declination started going northwards, the sun started coming overhead different latitudes. So, we will bring all that together in the next episode on ritu and discuss what are the seasons, how are they defined, and why they are problematic and difficult to accept as they stand. But looking at it another way, if somebody has defined 1/3 of the year as winter, they certainly did not live in Tamil Nadu or Andhra Pradesh or Kerala. So, this gives us a clue as to where the people who defined the Hindu calendar actually lived. We can never be sure of it, because these things happened long time back, but these kind of things, the decision they made on ritus gives you a clue as to where they probably lived, where they definitely did not live. And this is because, as I mentioned once before, ritus is the only calendric element where you distinctly see a difference on the ground. Otherwise, whether I say Makara sankranti or Mesha sankranti or any of the, Tithi changed from Dvitiya to Tritiya or Chaturthi to Panchami, we can't make out any difference on the ground. But ritu, we feel it on the ground. And if the definition is not right, we feel it on the ground. So, we will discuss more of this in the upcoming episode on ritu. But until then, I thank you very much for staying with me and watching these episodes. It's more than a year since I started this Ahargana series. I started this in Sauramana Yugadi of 2022. Now we are past Sauramana Yugadi of 2023. And if you are still with me watching all these episodes, my sincere thanks to you. Thank you very much for watching these episodes. I am trying to make the Hindu calendar as simple as possible, the astronomy behind the Hindu calendar, and I believe that all Hindus should have an understanding of the astronomy behind the Hindu calendar. And the astronomy which we have, Hindu astronomy, has a very long tradition. We have had many astronomers. In fact, I made a separate community post on my YouTube channel where I have given a list of 25 Hindu astronomers over a period of almost 1500 years tradition, starting with an unknown author of Surya Siddhanta, but the immediate next one is Aryabhatta, who's a household word in India, and going on and on for century after century. And you know Savai Jai Singh, who built the Jantar Mantars in Delhi and in Jaipur and a few other places, he was following in the same traditions of Hindu astronomers, but he was more recent, more closer to our times. And even if we can't understand the deep astronomy which these astronomers worked on, their Siddhantas, I have listed the names of their Siddhanta Karana works also, they go into great detail on mathematics and astronomy. But mathematics is called Ganita Pada and astronomy is called Gola Pada. But I am not going into details of these. At least we should know how the astronomy impacted the calendar, how it forms the basis of the calendar. So, please do forward the link of this channel to everybody on your contacts and encourage them to take a look at these videos and try to learn and understand the Hindu calendar. So, once again thank you very much for watching these videos, and until I see you again next time, take care and bye bye.